Meeting, and let me make sure I've got Commissioner John Tovey, Commissioner Teresa Garrett, Commissioner Danny Curran, Commissioner Juan Bridges, Mayor Jackie Sargent, Mary, Alyssa, Cheryl, and Alan from office staff, and also Marsha Tanner. And I see Doug has gotten on.
Done an overlay aerial.
Yeah. And Cindy, I'm assuming that is you. And Preston Royster, okay. Anybody else? Amy, we got? Preston, Amy, Alyssa. Okay. Alan, before we get started, I was looking at the note that came out with a couple of notes as far as an agenda, talking about the water and sewer projects on College Street and then the Hatchers Creek PUD. Weren't we also going to touch on streets that we were going to have to adjust on the payment schedule on?
Yeah, we can touch on that. We have, since our last meeting, made contact with the DOT to try to get them to schedule a meeting to work with us, sit down and talk about coinciding schedules as far as resurfacing initiatives. That meeting has not taken place yet. We're still trying to get the DOT to give us a few days and times. We are pushing forward with making contact with our financial institutions that we contacted previously and had gotten the board some information and numbers regarding borrowing some money to do the initiative. We are in the process right now of reconfirming those numbers or seeing if the numbers have changed in order to get that information to you when we do meet and have another conversation regarding the road. So we're not prepared at this point in time to tell you dates, times, amounts, and all those types of things, as we've not yet managed to meet with the Department of Transportation, but we are doing our homework now in preparation for having that meeting and then getting back with this committee.
Okay. Danny, do you have any other questions on that?
No.
Okay. Well,
Ron, can I just ask one quick question?
Yeah.
This is right after we had the initial committee meeting discussing all of that. Jimmy Crawford got in touch with me and said that he'd had a conversation with somebody at Division 5 and gotten a positive response, and I sent that on to Alan. So Alan, I'm just curious, is the hold up with, does Jimmy Crawford need to do an additional poke or anything?
I don't believe so at this time, no. We know he's available to assist us and we'll be glad to do so. We just need to put in an additional request for that meeting to take place via the proper folks at Division 5. If it gets to a point where we feel like they're just ignoring us, avoiding us, what have you, then we may contact Mr. Crawford to give a nudge, but not yet. No, ma'am.
Okay, that's fine. And of course, he did that on his own without anybody asking. He had just read about it in the paper. And just very quickly, because am I recalling correctly, they had originally said their deadline was the 24th, which is like Monday. So are they kind of loosening up on the deadline since they're the ones that are not answering our entreaties to meet?
If I can throw in there, last week, apparently there were some issues with the City of Oxford email system, and emails were not necessarily going out, especially were not going out and not necessarily coming in. John Sander emailed me just this morning after I resent the email to him and said he had just now gotten the email requesting a meeting and that possibly next Tuesday would be when we could set that up. So hopefully after next Tuesday we can have some response. I'm trying to think what the deadline of the 24th is that you mentioned.
I thought when we discussed it in the last meeting, they were saying they were, you know, the deadline to hear back from us, well, I thought there was an August 24th deadline that was mentioned in the materials that we got for the last Public Works meeting.
I don't believe there was. So they just want to make sure, you know, whether or not we are trying to piggyback their project or not. I think we have made that clear, that if it would hold it up, that we want them to proceed without the joint effort, and we would do separate, but they did not give us a deadline of the 24th. So, and now that we have some response back from DOT, we can get that meeting scheduled and hopefully move forward with that conversation.
Great, thank you.
Okay, if we can, let's go ahead and move on to the water and sewer projects on College Street. Alan, are you going to start that?
I can. I'll be glad to. I'll let Amy dive in here once I give some opening remarks in regards to it. I think everybody's aware that College Street is one of our targeted areas for one of our infrastructure initiative improvement projects. We are kind of in the process now of looking at how best to approach this project and make sure that we not only get the project done with a minimum of cost, but with a minimum of impact. And that is really the biggest part of the reason why we're having this conversation today. Amy and I have talked about it a couple of times about College Street. As you know, if you go down College Street and you envision College Street, College Street's a fairly wide boulevard, and on either side of it, it does have some significant mature trees, as well as some of our, historical older homes. And when we start talking about putting in water and sewer lines as replacements, we're really talking about disruption significantly on either side of the road that could impact trees and sidewalks and other infrastructure down through there. So we started to think about, or we've started to think about, how can we potentially do this or look at it in a different way. And the different way potentially to look at it is, with the wideness of the boulevard, could we potentially utilize a median approach in the center and have the utilities basically go down that median? Of course, the other part of this is that it is a DOT road. It is state maintained. So we would have to be working with the Department of Transportation. And that is what has really kind of spurred us to the point of having this committee meeting to start this conversation with the board about that potential option, and seeking your guidance, or really your reaction to that, as far as our potentially exploring that with the Department of Transportation. Amy can probably go into greater detail in this than I can, but I believe that as part of the analysis done a few years ago by the Department of Transportation, they did not rule that out potentially as an option, as far as College Street itself having a median. I don't know how it would all shake out in the end as far as cost. It may potentially be less expensive because of what we would be doing, as far as not having to work around the existing infrastructure quite so much, as delicately as we would have to. But it would take some coordination with the Department of Transportation, and of course their approval in doing it. So I've let it off. Amy, kind of take it from there and fill in any blanks that I have missed, since I tried to hit it with a broad brush. Amy, you're on mute.
How about now?
Oh, great.
It's a much better when you can actually hear what I'm saying and not just see what I'm putting up on the screen. Bill Rourke with McGill, they are the ones that are doing the water and sewer design going down College Street, and they put together this sketch that I just put up on the screen showing that we have an option of potentially putting a median down the middle of College. One of the advantages to this would be getting the water and sewer lines farther away from the side of the road where, as Alan mentioned, we have a number of mature trees. When we went back and looked at the comprehensive transportation plan that was done by the DOT, and Jackie, I believe you were involved with that as well, the long-term plan by DOT indicated that a left turn lane should be put the entire length of College. One of the things that we felt would be a more beautiful, more elegant look for the city of Oxford would be to put a median down the middle of that road rather than a left-hand turn lane. What we are looking at is the water and the sewer. One would be on one side of the median, one would be on the other side of the median. And the result of saving the replacement of patching the asphalt twice, once for the water line, once for the sewer line, we would be able to offset the cost of the little bit of redesign we would have to do to relocate the water and sewer to the median, and the cost of the curb and gutter. It would probably be a wash or a cost savings to actually do this process of putting the median in. So we wanted to look at this. The DOT, as we've mentioned in other meetings, has had our plans for 7-8 months now looking at approving them. It has finally come to the forefront and the top of their pile. And before they actually approve it, we want to see whether this is an option we want to consider. What we would be looking at doing, the downtown master plan calls for a median starting at Watkins and going to McClanahan. We would actually start there at Watkins, and depending on how things look after we fully examine the entire length of the project, is taking that median probably down to just past Roxborough, near the vicinity of the hospital. But that has yet to be determined. We would have wide openings between the medians for left turn lanes that, as you can see, into, you know, Rectory Street or Hayes or Forest, into the Orphanage, Alexander, where there would actually be sufficient room for a car to pull kind of in that median area while they're waiting to turn left that would not impede traffic. Now, if you have a truck with a long trailer on it, you'd have to wait for a break in traffic and they couldn't pull fully into that median. But we think we can keep traffic flowing adequately on College with that median and kind of solve a number of things with regard to the trees, asphalt patching, and the look of Oxford as people come into Oxford is, you know, the left turn, middle turn lane doesn't really make a statement. I think, you know, a median with grass and flowers is something that certainly provides a more welcoming picture of Oxford as you're coming in. So before Bill and I and Alyssa started to go too far down this road, we wanted to get the board's feedback and see what opinion you had of us going forward with this.
Just for clarification, has this been proposed to DOT?
At this point, it has not.
Has not, okay.
If the board is not in favor of it, I don't want to derail the process of the approval of the current encroachments that are submitted for the water and sewer utilities.
Well, I think it's,
Any thoughts?
I think it's a great idea. The median is aesthetically, it's beautiful. And as far as cost, it could save us money, but it's going to save the trees and it's going to save possibly the houses along there with all the vibrations going on. So for me, the median is the way to go.
But if you do that, some people will have to go past their home to get into their driveway to go back up the street.
I agree. That
I mean,
could be.
has anyone had any conversation with them on how they actually feel about it? It would be an inconvenience for them.
We have
Not
not.
yet, no, ma'am. Not at this point, no.
Yeah,
What-
that would be my question also. Have we talked to the resident?
Well, I have a question, Amy. I see from this, I don't see where Watkins Street, where the median would actually start. Would this impede a left turn into Warehouse Square parking?
We did a sketch of just, a section of College, and this is a very preliminary sketch, but we would certainly look at something like Old Warehouse Square and whether or not, where that started and stopped. I used Old Watkins as, as a starting point because that was shown on the master plan. Certainly we can start and stop it wherever we want. And, with regard to the left-hand turn question for the homeowners or having to do a U-turn, we have that same scenario on Main Street right now
Yeah, you do.
Yes, we do.
and on Spring. So,
Not Martin Luther King.
Well,
correct.
And on Martin Luther King, yeah. So
I agree that it is there, but still, you don't want an outcry from them saying that's something they truly would not want. I was just curious, have we had any feedback or, because aesthetically, yes, it does sound like it would be a much prettier site and a more aesthetically pleasing entryway into our city, but you don't need a major outcry from the community because the street is majorly wide. And I was sitting here thinking, why was it so wide?
I think it was that wide because there was originally a median in it.
Oh, okay.
And I think the median was removed, and you make an excellent point that how we communicate with our community is important. And so I don't disagree with that at all, Teresa. But I would also add, I think this is brilliant.
Yeah.
Again, not discounting Teresa's points of reaching out to the homeowners, but it would also, there is a tendency to speed down College Street because of its width. So this would have a traffic calming effect. And also in the pedestrian plan that was done several years ago, there's actually some discussion about creating some type of traffic island for the kids to cross the street when they're dropped off
absolutely.
at Cradle, because it is so tremendously wide. And lastly, I would I'm just going to finish this and then I'll yield to you, Teresa. I was actually in an accident 20 years ago because I was turning right into the Masonic Home for Children near the playing fields, but I wasn't all the way over to the right. And so somebody decided to try to pass me on my right because the road is so wide. And of course I wasn't looking for a car from there because there aren't two lanes. And so the width of the street as it stands now does, I think, lend itself to some risky behavior sometimes.
Comment, Ron.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you had any thoughts, Danny.
Well, my first thing is, and I agree with the mayor, because I get out and walk that street almost every day, and speeding is a big problem. And I have actually seen vehicles get past on College Street and cross over the double line that goes through the middle of College Street. So absolutely, we need to contact the homeowners, but I can see that hadn't been done yet because we haven't talked about it. So no, that hadn't been done yet. It shouldn't have been done because we haven't discussed it.
Well, maybe they might have asked about it.
I'm not through. Wait a minute.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I think it would be a good way to stop the tractor and trailers from coming through town. I've complained about that for years. I think if you put a median there, it could stop and eliminate, other than delivery trucks taking food and drink downtown, you cut out people delivering shingles, concrete from Gate Concrete going through the middle of Oxford where they shouldn't be to begin with. If I was going to suggest where to start, I would start at the crosswalk at Union Bank. You can go a little ways, you can stop, have you turn into Warehouse Square, start again. We want to have a bulb out there to slow down traffic, make it easier to cross that street. It would be a great way for people to cross the street downtown. They don't have to run for their life. They cross, they get to the median, then they can go again. We can get input from our citizens that live on that street, that own property. I can see it being a little bit of an inconvenience. One other question, Amy, would it affect on-street parking any at all?
One of the things that we are looking at is how many homes actually need to do on-street parking. We also are looking at the, the queue that builds up for parents picking up their children at Cradle Elementary, and the possibility of the areas where we may need to, we could offset the median slightly in order to allow that on-street parking. But if you think about it, on Main Street, we have on-street parking, one-way traffic, a median, one-way traffic, and on-street parking. Given the amount of asphalt that we have on College, in many areas, we could still have that same scenario. If it's more narrow, we'd have to look at a case-by-case basis. Does somebody need on-street parking for some reason?
Okay. That's all I have.
So at this point, are we just basically looking at a recommendation to the full board to proceed with this or not?
Well,
Essentially, yes, sir. We're kind of looking for some consensus before we actually sit down and initiate this conversation with the DOT. We didn't want to do that before having this conversation.
Okay, before I address the Public Works Committee and then allow other comments, are there any specific comments on this topic?
I would have one further question regarding the impact on the actual school and how that will truly impact them and the pedestrian families. I mean, I've recently had a child there, and it was a very difficult task. If you didn't come straight down the street on the direction that the school was on, it was very difficult to access that area. So a median would impede that a lot more. So the stakeholders also would be the personnel at the school. I mean, and find out how it would impact them truly. I mean, I wasn't a walker, but I was a driver, and it was most difficult.
And you indicated that you had to come down College Street in the direction of the pickup. That would not change with the median. That would still be accounted for, and we would make sure that there was adequate room for the vehicles to be parked on the side of the road just as they do now.
It would limit your view if you came off of Rectory every blue moon to come back up. If you were there early and fortunate enough to jet across, that would probably impede doing anything like that. You have limited access to get to the corner of the school for pickup.
I'm not sure
As a proponent of getting everybody out, moving and walking more, Teresa, I would say it is also possible to park on the opposite side of the street and go over and get a child and bring them back to your car. And I know that probably sounds obnoxious, but since that was my career, you know, the goal for people's health is to get them walking as much as possible.
And you yourself said you had an accident there.
I had an accident because of, I had an accident. Right. I had an accident at the Masonic Home for Children because of the width of the road and somebody deciding that there was enough room for them to illegally pass me on the right.
Exactly.
So a median would actually clarify that it is there is not enough room. When you make the roadway narrower, it decreases the speed that cars move at. It's called the road diet. And so when you insert the median, it actually makes it more safe rather than less. And it does by creating those, it creates, you can create an island where there's a crosswalk for children to actually go partway across, wait in the protection of the island, and then continue across. So that's actually considered a safety device, an enhancement, rather than the other way around.
Yep, I'll add that all of the things that are being brought up are certainly valid points. I will also say that what you're looking at, or this option, is not foreign to the Department of Transportation. They have traffic engineers and specialists and people that deal with schools and pedestrian counts and everything you can imagine that will be looking at all of these factors, components, and things that make it unique here in Oxford in putting together any analysis that is done that may lead to them granting approval. So it'll be done with a fine-tooth comb. We'll certainly encourage and elicit public input in regards to this. I'm sure that public input and scrutiny has already begun. I think Mr. Tanner's on here, so I'm sure that the neighbors will be talking about this potential option. But I will also add that it is a potential option, and it is something that we would have to coordinate very carefully and very closely with the Department of Transportation. And just having the drawing here displayed does not mean that it's a reality. It is something that we believe is a very viable option that could work for this area. I see a number of potential good qualities about it when you try to weigh pros and cons. As far as the way we want Oxford to look in the future, it's much more aesthetically pleasing, certainly would be, versus what the potential option is if we go down both sides of College Street. So what we were hoping to do this afternoon is really kind of engage with you, get your feedback, take your comments, and if the consensus of this committee was to move forward, we would seek to schedule that meeting with the DOT and really, bounce it off of them and engage their reaction, just like what we're doing now. It's just part of a natural progression that we would go through. So it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but we need to have this conversation.
Can I
let me just start with, if you won't mind, with the members of the Public Works Committee, and then I'll include the other commissioners also. But Danny, yay or nay?
I'm in favor
The
of
idea
it,
of
yes.
proposing to accept this with some input from talking to the public about concerns and issues that we've talked about.
Yes, I'm in favor, yes.
Teresa?
I'm in favor.
All right, I'm in favor. Quan, you had something?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I think there are two pluses to this. When they talked about the fact that trees would be saved, and in addition, it would be cheaper. I mean, you can't help but say, good Lord, why any concerns? But I also agree with Commissioner Gilreath that, we do want to get feedback from certainly the residents that live on that road, and possibly even other citizens that may travel that road a lot, in particular the parents who might have students at the school. My question, though, and this is maybe a question that the mayor can answer, why was the median that used to be there removed?
I can't speak to that. Danny might know more than I do, but my bet is to accommodate the 18-wheelers that he talked about, that as vehicles got larger and larger, because the country has gone through phases, and the phases were efficiency, the industrial age, and all of those things. And I think it was to accommodate larger vehicles. And now we recognize that we lost some quality of life issues in doing that. So that's my thought. Danny may want to add, but I'm going to say one last thing, which is I want to do an absolute shout out to Amy, the manager, McGill, anybody who thought about this, about taking concerns that were coming from the community and being willing to take the time to revisit this and look creatively. This is a perfect example about how, when many minds come together, you have the potential to get to a better solution. And I just cannot thank our staff enough for the willingness to look at a different way of handling this. I'm thrilled.
Okay, I have not given Commissioner Tovey a chance to comment.
No, I really like the idea. I think from two really points of view, the aesthetics of the city and also from the safety point of view. It is a traffic speeding calming, safer for children crossing. So it's got many advantages.
Okay. So Alan and Amy, you hear the consensus of this committee, recommendation to go to the full board, that we proceed with public having a chance to look at it and have their input.
Let me throw something out there. We need to go ahead and proceed with approaching DOT with this, since it's going to be another several weeks before there is a board meeting. And if we want to potentially impact the water and sewer encroachments that we have now under the review, we need to go ahead and approach DOT. And this is not a guarantee. This was a brainstorm to say, what if we did it a little bit differently? And appreciate the mayor recognizing that, you know, we're trying to look at things holistically and not just what are we doing with the water and sewer. You know, and hopefully this will prolong the life of the trees. We are still, you know, the trees still are on this side of the road. The roots probably go out into the road. There's no guarantee that, you know, we are not going to impact them at all, but it certainly gets a little bit farther away and a better possibility of minimizing the impact. And, you know, with the cost being a wash, you know, certainly is something that would like to work on. But Bill and I, you know, McGill and I need to go ahead and approach DOT about this pretty rapidly.
Yeah. I understand
As soon as
that, because
next Tuesday.
if it's turned down for any reason, then we don't have to do anything.
Right.
If it is accepted, then perhaps a more definite plan with ideas to show where some impacts are can then be better presented to the public.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else before we move on? All right, let's talk about the Hatcher's Creek situation.
All right, I'll start
that.
that one as
Okay.
Amy kind of gets her screenshots ready. I think everybody's aware of the Hatcher Creek Plan Unit development and what is proposed out there near Walmart on 15. We had a conversation yesterday with their engineering folks in regards to the Hatcher Creek Plan Unit development and some of the current constraints that we have, especially in regards to wastewater collection and transmission and capacity. So essentially that is the topic of our second agenda item, is the not just Hatcher's Creek, but that entire area as it develops. I think we all hope and believe that with the Hatcher Creek development or Plan Unit development coming in there, it will encourage and spur even more development to take place in that area. And we were trying to look at it from the perspective of what do we need to do now, not only to accommodate the Hatcher's Creek Plan Unit development, but when future development comes to call and all of the acreage that is in that area starts to develop further for commercial, retail, and residential, how do we get best prepared to accommodate that growth to the best of our ability? So that is what has really led to this conversation. We continue to have conversations with Hatchers Creek folks about their plans, and their plans as far as the plan unit development are changing just a little bit. We heard a little bit more about that yesterday in regards to what they're going to be doing out there. But right now, as it sits currently, and I'm trying to remember how much detail has been provided to this committee and to this board about what's out there currently, but it's just not capable of handling and transmitting the volume of wastewater that we see coming. So what we have done with our consulting engineer is take a look at a number of options to deal with this and to accommodate it. And I'll let Amy kind of do a little bit more as a precursor to what you're getting ready to look at. But I will say that, it's not something that you've got to necessarily decide this moment today, because like I said just a few minutes ago, the folks at Hatchers Creek are now looking at this information and trying to match it to what their plans are and see if everything jives, because what we're looking at is every time we start talking about infrastructure, it's got dollars associated with it, and this does as well. So we want to try to get the biggest bang for our buck as we possibly can, as well as looking towards the future while we encourage some of the desired growth that we believe is coming. Essentially, we're trying to be as smart as we possibly can to encourage the development, see things progress, and not overextend ourselves. But right now, what you've got out there as far as the existing infrastructure, it is just underarmed, I guess, for lack of a better term, of trying to go into this fight to take on a lot more wastewater collection and transmission in that area. So, Amy, if you'll kind of take it away from there, and I know you've got hopefully what we saw yesterday. I'm going to assume that's what we're going to look at.
Well, and actually, I'm going to request that Alyssa, who put together the presentation that we had yesterday, go through that. I'm sure she can provide the information a little bit more succinctly than I can, but certainly want to look at what do we have today, what do we need to serve the developments that are currently approaching us, and what do we need to do in order to serve them the area long term. So I think Alyssa has just shared her screen, and hopefully y'all can see it. And I think she actually remembered to take herself off mute, so she's one step ahead of me already.
All right. Can you all see my mouse here?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So as Alan and Amy mentioned, the Hatcher Creek development provides just slightly above the capacity that the Walmart lift station is currently capable of. And that's not including, there's the second Lewis Street complex development looking to move into that area. So hands down on the table, to accommodate the flow from those two developments, you're going to need some improvements. So that's the baseline of this conversation. And realizing that upgrades are necessary, in an effort to save money in the coming years as this area develops, instead of, making small to moderate sized upgrades, for this development as it comes in, and then more upgrades for this development, Amy asked us to look at taking a holistic approach to upgrading this entire area, looking forward to how it might build out in the next few decades. So that's the context for the presentation I'm about to show you. And the alternative, there are three alternatives we're looking at for potentially upgrading this area to be able to not just accommodate the flow of these immediate developments, but looking out to as this entire area expands. The first one, as you'll see, is upgrading a lot of the existing infrastructure you already have in place. The second alternative is to build a new force main up I-85 towards the wastewater treatment plant. And the third alternative is a modification of alternative B, where you delay some of the more major upgrades until you have more developer commitment. First, we'll look at alternative A, upgrading some of your existing infrastructure. In the top left here, this is what the infrastructure currently looks like in this area. So this parcel here, this 5-sided parcel, is where the PUD is proposed. And the existing sewer, gravity sewer here, flow comes down this gravity sewer into the Walmart Highway 15 lift station, gets pumped up via force main all the way to Industry Drive, and then travels along gravity sewer, along Industry Drive, down the outfall into the wastewater treatment plant. Now in these later phases, you'll see as the parcels become colored, that means we're anticipating development in those areas. So phase 1, we're saying, what do we need to accommodate just Hatcher Creek and the Lewis Street complex? And then in later phases, phase 2 is a partial build out if you have more interest in business and some more residential. And phase 3 would be the full build out of this area to the west of I-85. So when you're just looking at upgrading existing infrastructure, the first steps you would need to do to accommodate Hatcher Creek and the Lewis Street complex would be to build 1 to 2 new lift stations serving those parcels. It seemed yesterday that the developer is leaning towards building 1 lift station. And then that flow would come again down into the gravity sewer. You would have to upsize the gravity sewer, upsize the pumps and wet well at the lift station, and at this point, upsize the gravity sewer along Industry Drive. And it's a big cost. Here it says $7.3 million. If the developer is in fact only looking at 1 lift station, it could probably take about like $0.8 million off of that cost. So that's something we discussed yesterday and I just haven't had a chance to update yet. But about, let's say $6.5 million for that first phase. Phase 2, as you have more build out in these areas, you'll have to upsize the gravity sewer down towards the wastewater treatment plant, potentially add a pump to the lift station for a cost of about $4 million. And you'll see the costs get lower as you go on because you've made most of the major improvements already. In the third phase for full build out, you could potentially abandon a lift station, and you might still have to upsize or add a pump to accommodate full build out here. So this would be a first phase of envision it as coming along this northern route to the wastewater treatment plant, which is existing, but essentially you have to upsize everything along this existing route. So that's the first possibility. So the total cost for this alternative would be about $13.8 million if we are looking at only 1 Hatcher Creek lift station. One of the advantages being you initially utilize some existing infrastructure, though a disadvantage being it does have a high phase 1 cost when you only have commitment from 2 developers, and it is the highest cost alternative. And if you look at how much you might want these developers themselves to contribute, we looked at that. If you take all of the flow that would be built out in this area coming towards the Walmart Highway 15 lift station, how much is each developer contributing to that total flow? And so if you take that proportional contribution, here it would be for the Hatcher Creek about $2.3 million and for Lewis Street about $0.4 million. So that's the first alternative here. The next option, as we mentioned, here's the existing infrastructure again. Instead of upgrading everything along this northern route to the wastewater treatment plant, you still upsize the gravity sewer, but you build a new force main along I-85 and a little bit of gravity sewer to meet up with the existing gravity sewer into the wastewater treatment plant. So that would be phase one, upsizing the Walmart lift station and building a new force main. That would be about $8 million. Again, just carry through, adjusted a little bit for these 2 lift stations to 1 lift station. And then the later phases here are much lower in cost because all you're really doing is maybe adding a pump at the lift station, upsizing this last bit of gravity sewer, and in the end here, if this is even on the table anymore, abandoning this lift station, it might not exist at all. That would be the last step here, maybe upsizing the pumps again to accommodate full build out of this area here. So that's how this alternative here, you're taking the southern route with a new force main up to the wastewater treatment plant, which is different than the first option. And that'll come out to about $11.8 million, with the advantages being that the new force is less costly than upsizing the existing infrastructure. And the force main or just the easement on I-85 can also serve a force main from another lift station. If you were to build another lift station in this area to serve east of I-85, it could also utilize that same easement. One of the disadvantages, it does have a high phase one cost when again you only have commitment from those 2 developers. And the developer contributions here would be similar. As I mentioned, the third alternative is a little bit of a variation on this one. Again, here's our existing infrastructure going up north. And here, you could potentially, in order to just serve the PUD right now, or the Hatcher Creek property right now, build a new force main up to Industry Drive, and then upsize the gravity sewer on Industry Drive. And that would be about $4.5 million. And you could push off building this whole long force main until you have more contribution and more commitment from other developers. So in that case, a phase 2 would look like potentially switching the direction of this flow to go back down into your new upsize lift station, upsizing the gravity sewer, building that new force main, building that new gravity sewer, and upsizing this little bit of existing gravity sewer. And that's phase 2 here is where you would get that big cost of upsizing the lift station and building this whole new force main, but again, with a little bit more commitment. And then phase 3, again, would just be potentially abandoning the lift station if it were to be put in, gravity sewer outfall through this additional property, and upsizing or adding pumps to the Walmart Highway 15 lift station. So this option comes out to about $13.2 million, an advantage being it does have much lower phase 1 cost, with the disadvantage being it does potentially construct some superfluous infrastructure if you were going to build that force main just to serve the PUD for phase 1. The developer contributions would be similar. Here's a summary slide of the different alternatives: upgrading what's existing, building the new force main, and the delayed variation of alternative B and their respective costs. Again, you could take off about maybe $0.8 million, and a summary of the advantages and disadvantages.
One of the items I'd like to make clear with the developer contributions is, when it mentions 1.9 to $2.3 million, part of this cost is expense that they would be incurring just on their site in order to construct their project. So this is not, you build your project and you need to cut a check to the city for $2.3 million for your contribution.
Right.
This is, their contribution on site for their development as well as some potentially off site.
Right, and something that also came up yesterday was, if I go back here, the lift stations, whether it's 1 or 2, that they would be building to serve their development should be built with the capacity also to serve this teal parcel that's northwest of them, because it also drains down in this direction, and it likewise has a ridge that runs right along the middle of the property, meaning whatever flow is generated by this northern section is going to go into whatever infrastructure they put in for the northern section of Hatcher Creek, and likewise the southern section will drain down to the southern section infrastructure of Hatcher Creek. So again, that's something that came up yesterday.
Wow.
May I ask a question?
Please.
So first of all, this is awesome. And Alyssa, thank you for the thoroughness of your slides and making it so easy to follow each step of the discussion. And I think you already kind of answered my question, but am I clear that looking at alternative C, where you are increasing the line and then going in another direction, we, as I understand it, so we really don't have a need to upsize the line going up Industry Drive and so on, if at later date we end up going up along I-85. Am I understanding that correctly? That if once we divert, if we go up I-85, at that point we would no longer have the we no longer really need to have a larger line going up Lewis and Industry.
Right. My calculations, you will still likely have to upsize just the part along Industry Drive. Right now it's an 8-inch line. And I calculated that, wouldn't be able to accommodate the flow then from the 8-inch force main coming into it. But you would not have to upsize these much larger sections. And that's, big cost down here. They're already 24+ inch lines, potentially needing to be upsized to 36-inch or even bigger to accommodate all of this flow. So it is correct that, you would have to upsize this part to just accommodate phase 1, but not the rest of this. Well, this end piece here at the very end.
And let me add that all of this, what McGill has done is they've taken about 1,001 options and boiled it down to 3 alternatives with 3 phases. And so one of the questions that we put forth to the developers, the engineers working for the developers yesterday is, what phasing, for your project are you looking at? Because how they approach their project, when they anticipate their build out, will make a difference in what option that we choose is the best one moving forward. And it could be a hybrid of a number of these options. And so we may need to upgrade the line on Industry Drive for a short-term solution, or if we decided we're just going to go for it and we're going to do the big upgrade for a line going down I-85, then maybe we skip that phase. So this is very much a juggling act to see where the different parties are, what kind of timeline are they in, what does the city want to do. Our goal is that we know other municipalities that aren't far from here that have overcommitted and underdelivered and not been able to keep up with where the growth is actually happening. And while we certainly are looking forward to the PUD, going in the Lewis Street development, we don't want to give 100% of our capacity away to one developer and not allow future development to occur in this region. So that's the reason it took us a little while, that's the royal us, that took McGill a little while to put this, together. After I said, we need to look at the long-term goals and range, for the city, because we have a potential for a lot of growth to occur for a city of our size. And if we want that to occur, we have to plan for it.
And I would add, thank you very much for answering my question so thoroughly. And I would just add that I have heard from some folks that there's a desire to push development on the other side of I-85, as you pointed out. So if we had something going up I-85. It does where, you know, of course, we're already, the county has built a law enforcement center, that it does open up some development options there while addressing an existing development problem, but then opening the door to have capacity to handle stuff on the other side. Thank you.
What do we need to do at this point? To me, it seems like option C is gonna be the more immediate, prudent way to go.
I think at this point, one of our biggest goals was to get this in front of the Public Works Committee, and, you know, down the line, we'll need to get this in front of the board, because as you've noticed, this is not for the faint at heart. If we want to look at future growth, we have to understand that it does not come free. And we don't want to get farther down the line and the board has never seen the information. And we just got this in from McGill in the last few weeks and wanted to get this to the board. There's not a decision that needs to be made today. We are talking to the developers and their engineers to see how they are proceeding forward. Once we have a better handle on their timelines and what they want to, how they're going to phase it. It sounded like yesterday they're starting with apartments and townhomes, single family residential would be last. That impacts where the flow is going to hit our system, which then impacts what is our first task to complete. So it's right now it's an informational for the board and the committee. And as we move forward with the developers, we will be, you know, coming back to the board and saying, this appears to be our next steps. What would you like us to do at that point?
Will this also include, if it's capable, at the next commissioners meeting, a general update of what all has changed since we did this discussion?
If we have any new information by the time we have a board meeting, we can certainly pass that on to the board. Some of these things move quickly, sometimes they move slowly. So I can't guarantee we'll have anything new, but if we do, we can certainly pass that on.
I just say a general review, because while we've got good attendance here with for the commissioners, we do have a few that aren't with us.
Right, and we can certainly make this presentation available. I just forwarded it to Alyssa, and she can send that out for everybody to have to look at in a little bit more detail, since there was a lot of information in this, and it's takes a minute to digest it.
I think that'd be a great idea. Danny, Teresa, any comments?
I think this was an excellent presentation to lay it out and give us a heads up on what's to come. And I like the way that they put it in different phases to give us an understanding of, if we do this, then this is going to cost this, this, and this is who's going to incur the cost at what phase. So this is excellent. And as a newbie, this was fantastic for me.
Danny?
No, I'm good.
Juan? John?
Yeah, I just would, you know, certainly it was a good presentation, very informative. And the question for me is, what can the city avoid or afford? I mean, it's simple. I mean, we're taking on a lot of projects, and and I'm excited about being part of it. But you know, part of me also says, especially after listening to what we're going to try to do relative to, you know, athletics and different projects relative to that phase, and then to talk about this kind of money for, you know, for something else. I'm just trying to figure out how much can we afford. That's, and so I guess the manager and others will sort of help us understand that part.
Very valid concern.
Well,
It is.
Mayor?
Yep, let me comment real quick on that. It is a very valid concern. It's a very valid concern that we also have here as staff. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to get this information to you, so that you could see it and not be basically pressed to make any kind of decision at this point in time. Just looking at it, thinking about it, what is also going to assist in driving this is additional development commitments, and part of the cost sharing that needs to be done by those development commitments, including system development fees and the improvements and all of those things that need to be made so that the city is not just bearing this cost. And for some that could look at it from the standpoint of the city, speculating development, we don't want to really get into that game either. We do believe that, the city is going to expand, that it's going to grow, that we're going to progress, but we certainly want to do it in a smart fashion that spreads the cost around to the best of our ability, because we also understand that right now we've taken on, close to whatever it is, $40 million of additional utility debt that we're going to have to very carefully monitor, and this is potentially some more that adds to that. But you also look at it from the standpoint of growing pains, like we've been talking about for the last couple of years. These are what comes with growing pains. That's why they call them growing pains, because they're painful. But there is a cost to be in business and to be a city that is being looked at for development interest to come in and take place. And we're trying to do everything that we possibly can to do this in an organized, responsive, and intelligent fashion that is planned out more towards the future than just reactionary.
Well said. Well said, Alan. But again, I'm all for looking into the future. I think our city has got the great potential for growth. Can we afford to do it? Can we afford not to do it? And that's the way. But if you're careful, I think we could afford it. We have to look to the future.
Mayor, any comments from you?
Simple, I agree with everything that everybody has been said, and it just makes me proud once again to be associated with each of you and the staff and the hard work that is going on. Is it safe to assume that whatever approach, as we slowly wend our way forward, that we would of course look for every opportunity for grant and low interest loans to help support this?
No, absolutely. I think that's a major component of especially the force main option on 85. You realize that those properties on the east side of 85 are industrial properties. And, the likelihood and opportunity there, if you had a significant industrial prospect come for grant funding to assist you for the creation of jobs, is there. It is there. So that is certainly something to keep in mind, and certainly that we are cognizant of, and would seek any and every opportunity that we could to assist us in footing the bill for some of these things, because they're not cheap. You know that.
So that would be the one instance in which, if I understood you, there would that approach of going up 85 to begin with would have an edge, because it might enable us to ready a property that otherwise is less appealing for development. Is that what I'm hearing from you, Alan?
No, what I'm saying is that there are opportunities out there through Golden Leaf in the state and others to assist in funding opportunities to create jobs.
Right.
That's what everything is centered and revolves around for all of these grants that are out there, especially from a funding source such as Golden Leaf. So the opportunity is there because you have those large parcels out there that are zoned for industrial or commercial development to take place, that if they create the appropriate number of jobs that check the boxes for these funding agencies, that the opportunity is there for us to receive potentially some funding to assist us in putting in the infrastructure.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other comments? Well, Alan, Amy, and Melissa, I believe it was, thank you very much for your contribution and your work you put in today for bringing this information to us. Alan?
You're welcome. Before we leave, I will add one more thing that's not officially on the agenda, but you can kind of gauge from the number of projects that the city is taking on and the number of developments that are interested in coming. And Cheryl had given me an update this past week about those developments. It's not just Hatcher Creek that is looking to come to Oxford. The 96 South project is still very much moving forward. What is it? The Meadows at Ivy Day is still moving forward. We've had a number of calls and contacts regarding other properties in Oxford that people are looking at with the potential for development to take place. So what I'm getting at is that, you know, engineering is intrinsically and uniquely involved in all of these projects to make sure that as this development takes place, that it is being done in a very orderly and organized and intelligent fashion. And like we talked about during the budget process, there may soon be a need for us to be having some discussion about additional staffing. That day is getting close, if it's not here already, for engineering. So we'll be having some more conversation about that and how to approach that and what the additional staff would be doing in order to accommodate it. But right now, engineering is, you know, running around like chickens with their heads cut off with when you've got 3 different contractors in town doing infrastructure improvement projects and development interests calling on a daily basis. And we're also looking at receiving a little more pressure from the state of North Carolina to implement and enforce stormwater BMPs and all of these other things that now may be the time that we need to start really thinking about hiring some additional assistance in engineering.
Okay. Anything else? Well, I appreciate everybody participating in your comments, and look forward to getting that slide or the show so we can consider some more notes, and hopefully Pat and CJ can pick up on what we've talked about. If there's nothing else, then I will call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. We appreciate it.